Welcome to my channel. Subscribe and enjoy my new stories every day. It was a bright, sunny Saturday afternoon, and the park was bustling with life. My wife, Rachel, and I had decided to spend the day together, strolling through the park as we had done many times before. The fresh autumn breeze danced around us, lifting the leaves from the ground in small swirling eddies. It was one of those moments that felt almost perfect, with the sun filtering through the trees and the distant laughter of children playing nearby. I thought to myself that these peaceful days were the ones I lived for. But peace is a fragile thing. As we rounded the corner near the fountain, Rachel suddenly stopped, her face lighting up with a surprised smile. "Lily," she called out, waving at a woman a few feet away. The woman, tall and striking, turned around with an expression of equal surprise and excitement. "Rachel, I can't believe it's you," she replied, hurrying over to us. They embraced like long-lost friends, their conversation immediately filling with laughter and reminiscence. "This is my husband, David," Rachel said, motioning toward me. I extended my hand politely, smiling. But there was something in the way Lily looked at me, a flicker of recognition, that seemed odd. I pushed the thought aside. After some polite small talk, Lily turned to Rachel with a playful smirk. "So, how was the new hotel? Did you two have fun? It's a shame it couldn't be me there with you, but I'm glad the reservation didn't go to waste." She winked. Rachel's face froze. For a split second, she looked as if she had been struck, her lips parting in shock. I felt my stomach drop. The casualness of Lily's statement, combined with Rachel's sudden discomfort, ignited something dark inside me. I frowned, trying to make sense of what Lily had just said. "Hotel? What hotel?" I asked, glancing at Rachel. Her reaction told me everything I needed to know. Her eyes darted toward me in panic, before she quickly plastered on a nervous smile. "Oh, I forgot to mention it," Rachel stammered, her voice shaky. Lily had booked a hotel room, but something came up and she couldn't use it. She gave it to me. Lily, blissfully unaware of the tension rising between us, chuckled. "Yeah, I was supposed to go there with my boyfriend, but he had to cancel last minute. I figured you two would have a great time. But, hey, what matters is that someone enjoyed it." My chest tightened, anger slowly rising from deep within. I stared at Rachel, my mind racing. There was no way she had gone there with me. I would have remembered something like that. So who had she gone with? Rachel fidgeted, her fingers twisting the strap of her purse. "It was no big deal, really," she said quietly, avoiding my gaze. I could feel the blood pounding in my ears, my hands curling into fists at my sides. Every instinct I had screamed that something was wrong, terribly wrong. I couldn't shake the image forming in my mind. Rachel, in a hotel room that was meant for us, but with someone else. I kept my voice steady, but it was a thin veneer, barely concealing the fury building up inside. "Who did you go with, Rachel?" Her eyes widened, and she opened her mouth as if to answer, but nothing came out. The silence was deafening, an oppressive weight pressing down on me. Lily, finally noticing the tension, looked between us, confusion creasing her brow. "Wait, you didn't go together." Rachel shot her a warning glance, but it was too late. The damage was done. I turned to Rachel, my voice cold now, stripped of all warmth. "Who did you go with, Rachel?" There was a long pause. She swallowed hard, her face drained of color. "It's not what you think," she whispered, but her words were empty, hollow. I knew then that everything I feared was true. I could feel my body trembling, the betrayal cutting deep. I had trusted her with everything. And now, standing in the middle of this park, in front of her friend, I was learning that she had thrown it all away for someone else. I nodded, my throat tight, emotions threatening to choke me. "Who was it?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Rachel looked down, shame painted across her face. It was just a mistake, David." Who?" I demanded, my voice louder this time, sharp enough that Lily took a step back, startled. Rachel hesitated for a moment longer before her gaze met mine, and for the first time, I saw something I never thought I'd see in her eyes: guilt. "It was Mark," she said softly, almost inaudibly. Mark. My stomach twisted. Mark, her coworker. The one she always said was just a friend. The one who had been over to our house for dinners. The one I never suspected. The pieces of the puzzle clicked into place. And with it, a wave of nausea hit me. My head spun, the world tilting on its axis. The anger that had been bubbling beneath the surface surged forward like a tidal wave, threatening to drown me. I clenched my jaw, my fists trembling at my sides. But I didn't explode. Not yet. Instead, I turned on my heel and walked away. I couldn't bear to look at her anymore. I needed space to breathe, to think, to process the betrayal that had just shattered everything I thought I knew about my life. Rachel's voice echoed behind me, pleading, "David, wait. Please let me explain." But I didn't stop. Couldn't. The rage building inside me was too great. And I knew that if I didn't walk away now, I might do something I'd regret. As I walked through the park, my mind raced, and one thing became painfully clear. This wasn't something I could forgive. This wasn't something we could come back from. Rachel had destroyed us, and I would make sure she felt the same devastation I did. The seeds of revenge were already beginning to take root in my mind. There would be no forgiveness, no second chances. I would ruin her just like she had ruined me. And this was only the beginning. I stormed through the front door, my footsteps echoing sharply against the hardwood floors of our home. My mind was a whirlwind of anger, betrayal, and disbelief. The house, once a place of peace, now felt like a prison. Every corner a reminder of the life Rachel and I had built together, now tainted by her infidelity. Rachel had followed me home, but she kept her distance. The walk back from the park had been a silent war zone. I could feel her eyes on my back, pleading, but I didn't turn around once. I couldn't bear to look at her. Now, as I stood in the middle of our living room, I felt the weight of her presence behind me. She hovered near the doorway, uncertain, her breath shallow and anxious. The air between us was thick with unsaid words. "David," she finally whispered, her voice cracking. "Please let me explain." I spun around, my eyes locking onto hers. "Explain? What exactly is there to explain, Rachel?" My voice was sharp, venomous. "You cheated on me. You went to that hotel with him." Her face paled, and her lips trembled as she took a tentative step closer. "It was a mistake, David. I never meant for it to happen." I let out a bitter laugh, shaking my head. "A mistake. You don't accidentally end up in a hotel room with another man, Rachel. You made a choice. You chose him over me." My chest heaved with each breath, anger coursing through my veins like fire. Rachel clasped her hands together, her eyes pleading. "I was feeling lost, David. We've been so distant lately. I didn't know how to talk to you about it. Mark was just there. He listened to me and I snapped, cutting her off. "Just stop." The excuses, the pitiful attempt to rationalize her betrayal, it only made me angrier. "You think I'm stupid? You think I didn't notice how close you two had gotten?" I took a step forward, my hands clenched into fists. "You lied to me, over and over." Her eyes filled with tears, but I didn't care. I wasn't going to let her tears sway me. "Not this time. David, please," she begged, her voice breaking. "I love you. It was a mistake. But I love you." I scoffed, my heart hardening with each word. "Love?" I echoed. "You don't love me, Rachel. You love yourself. You love what you want. If you loved me, you wouldn't have done this. If you loved me, you would have talked to me instead of running to someone else." She took another step toward me, reaching out as if she wanted to touch me. I pulled back, disgusted by the thought of her hands on me now. "Don't," I warned, my voice low and dangerous. "Don't you dare." For a moment, we stood in silence, the tension between us almost unbearable. I could see the desperation in her eyes, but I couldn't bring myself to care. The woman I thought I knew, the woman I thought I loved, was a stranger now. "I can fix this," she whispered, her voice small. "We can fix this." I shook my head, incredulous. "Fix this? How? How do you fix something like this, Rachel? Do you think I can just forget what you did? That I'll ever trust you again?" My voice rose with each word, the fury inside me boiling over. You broke us. You broke me. Tears streamed down her face, but I felt nothing. No sympathy, no pity, only the cold, hard reality of what she had done. I made a mistake, she said again, her voice cracking. Please, David, give me a chance to make it right. I laughed bitterly, shaking my head. You want a chance? You had your chance, Rachel. You had it the moment you walked into that hotel room with him. I pointed toward the door, my hand shaking. Get out. Her eyes widened, shock spreading across her face. What? No, David, please. I said get out. I repeated, my voice hard and unyielding. I can't look at you right now. I need space. I need to think. But where will I go? She asked, her voice trembling with panic. Not my problem, I replied coldly. You should have thought about that before you cheated on me. For a moment, she stood there, frozen, as if she couldn't believe what was happening. Then, slowly, she turned and walked toward the door. Her movements were hesitant, almost as if she thought I might change my mind at the last second. But I couldn't. The betrayal was too fresh, too raw. As she reached the door, she paused, looking back at me one last time. David, I'm so sorry. I didn't respond. Couldn't. The pain in my chest was too great, the weight of her betrayal crushing me from the inside out. Without another word, she opened the door and stepped outside, the sound of the door clicking shut behind her reverberating through the house like the final nail in the coffin of our marriage. For a moment, I stood there in the deafening silence, my mind racing with everything that had just happened. Part of me wanted to scream, to punch something, to let out the anger that was consuming me. But instead, I sank down onto the couch, burying my face in my hands. What was I supposed to do now? How had we gotten here? I thought about all the times Rachel and I had laughed together, the moments we'd shared, the life we had built. And now, in the span of a few hours, it had all come crashing down. And for what? A fling. A mistake, as she called it. I clenched my fists, the fire of rage simmering beneath the surface once again. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Rachel thought this was just a bump in the road, something we could work through. But she was wrong. I would make her feel the same pain I was feeling. She had shattered my world, and I would make sure hers was destroyed in return. This wasn't just about a marriage anymore. It was about justice, about making her pay for betraying me in the worst possible way. Revenge. The word lingered in my mind like a dark promise. I wouldn't be the one left broken in the end. Rachel would. And this was only the beginning. I sat alone in the darkened living room, the quiet hum of the refrigerator in the distance, the only sound breaking the silence. The weight of everything that had happened pressed heavily on my chest. But beneath that weight, a fire was burning, fueled by anger and betrayal. Rachel's betrayal wasn't something I could forgive. There was no coming back from this. As I stared blankly at the wall, my mind started to churn. Images of Rachel with Mark flashed through my head, poisoning every memory I had of our time together. But the more I thought about it, the clearer my next steps became. She thought she could just walk away with nothing but a few tears and apologies. No, this was bigger than that. She had destroyed my trust, shattered the life we had built. And I wasn't about to let her walk away unscathed. Revenge. The word felt bitter in my mouth, but it was the only thing that made sense now. I stood abruptly, the adrenaline from my decision rushing through me, and I started pacing the room. If I was going to do this, I had to be smart. I had to be meticulous. Rachel wouldn't know what hit her. The first step was figuring out what mattered most to her, and then taking it away. It wasn't just about hurting her. It was about dismantling everything she held dear. I thought about Mark, the smug grin he probably had when they were together. He wasn't just a part of her infidelity, he was a part of her professional life as well. I remembered Rachel mentioning some kind of project they were working on together. Maybe that was my way in. I picked up my phone and hesitated for a moment, staring at the screen. My fingers hovered over the call button before I pressed it. The familiar ringtone filled the silence as I waited, adrenaline pumping through my veins. Hey, David. Long time no see, came the voice on the other end of the line. It was Greg, one of my old college friends. He worked in a tech firm and had always been the guy who could get information on just about anything. I hadn't spoken to him in a while, but I knew this was the kind of favor he would love. "Hey, Greg," I replied, my tone casual despite the storm brewing inside me. "Yeah, it's been a while. I need a favor." I could hear him chuckle. "A favor? Huh? What kind of trouble are you in this time?" "Not trouble. Let's just say I need some information on someone. Mark Phillips. He works with Rachel, my wife. Your wife's coworker." Greg's voice had a curious edge. "What are you looking for?" "Anything I can use," I said flatly. "Emails, messages, anything. I just need to know how deep this runs." There was a pause on the other end before Greg sighed. "This sounds serious, man." "It is." "All right," he said after a moment. "Give me a couple of days. I'll see what I can dig up." I thanked him and hung up the phone, a sense of grim satisfaction settling over me. Greg was thorough. If there was something incriminating between Rachel and Mark, he'd find it. I wasn't just going to expose their affair. I was going to burn their entire world to the ground. The next few days were tense. Rachel had tried to reach out multiple times, calling, texting, leaving voicemails. I ignored all of them. The thought of hearing her voice, of listening to more of her pathetic excuses, only fueled my anger. But she wasn't stupid. She knew something was coming. On the third day, as I sat at the dining table, my phone buzzed. A message from Greg. "Got what you need. Call me." I felt a surge of anticipation as I quickly dialed his number. He picked up after the first ring. "You're going to want to sit down for this," Greg said, his tone serious. I dug into Mark's emails, work messages, everything. "Turns out your wife and Mark have been seeing each other for months, and it wasn't just some one-time thing at a hotel. They've been exchanging more than just flirtations. There are some pretty intimate photos too. And it looks like Mark's been using his position at work to keep their affair under wraps." I clenched my jaw, my grip tightening on the phone. "How bad is it?" "It's bad, David," Greg said bluntly. "From what I can tell, Rachel's been fully invested in this thing with Mark. They've been meeting up at work, even using business trips as cover. If you're planning on going nuclear, you've got plenty of ammunition." I exhaled slowly, the weight of Greg's words settling over me. Months. They had been doing this behind my back for months. The pain that accompanied the betrayal was a cold, sharp thing, but it was overshadowed by the rage that now consumed me. "Send me everything you have," I said. My voice steadied despite the storm raging inside me. Greg agreed, and within minutes my phone buzzed again. Attached were dozens of screenshots, emails, texts, photos. I opened them one by one, my stomach churning as I scrolled through the explicit messages between Rachel and Mark. The photos were worse. Seeing her with him, the woman I once loved, was like a knife to the chest. But this wasn't just about Rachel and me anymore. This was about dismantling the life they had so arrogantly flaunted behind my back. And I knew exactly where to start. Later that night, I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop open, a single email draft on the screen. It was addressed to Mark's boss, the CEO of the company they both worked for. The subject line read, "Confidential, internal matter regarding Mark Phillips." I began typing, carefully crafting the email to expose Mark's inappropriate relationship with a colleague, my wife, and how he had used his position to cover up their affair. I attached the incriminating messages and photos, making sure that the evidence was clear and irrefutable. I knew this would ruin Mark professionally, but that was only the beginning. Satisfied with the email, I hovered over the send button for a moment, savoring the feeling of control, of retribution. This was it, the first move in my plan to tear their world apart. Without hesitation, I clicked send. As I leaned back in my chair, a sense of cold satisfaction settled over me. Mark wouldn't know what hit him, and Rachel, she would soon understand what it felt like to have everything crumble around her. The game had begun, and I was playing to win. The days after I sent the email to Mark's boss were a blur of anticipation. I knew that it would take time for everything to unravel, but the weight felt excruciating. I went through the motions of life, eating, sleeping, going to work, but my mind was consumed by thoughts of revenge. Rachel had tried contacting me less frequently as the silence between us stretched into weeks. I think she sensed something brewing, something dark, but she had no idea just how far I was willing to go. I waited. I was patient. And then it began. It was a Tuesday morning when the first domino fell. I was at work when I got a message from Greg. Check the news. I pulled up my phone and opened the local news app. The headline nearly made me laugh out loud. Local business scandal. Senior executive Mark Phillips under investigation for inappropriate relations with colleague. The article detailed everything: the inappropriate use of company resources, the secret meetings, the scandalous affair that had now exploded into the public eye. They hadn't mentioned Rachel's name. Not yet. But I knew it was only a matter of time before everyone connected the dots. Mark was done. His career, his reputation, everything he had built was going up in flames. I could already imagine the panic in Rachel's voice when she found out. I almost felt pity for her. Almost. When I got home that evening, Rachel was waiting for me in the living room. She looked pale, her eyes red from crying. A far cry from the confident woman who had always seemed in control. The second I walked in, she jumped up, her voice trembling. "David, you need to listen to me," she said, her words tumbling over each other in a desperate rush. "I know you've heard about Mark. Please, we need to talk." I didn't respond. I simply looked at her, feeling nothing but the cold satisfaction of seeing her crumble. "David," she continued, stepping closer. "I know I hurt you. I know I betrayed your trust, but we can fix this. We can still fix us." I stared at her, my expression unreadable. "Fix us," I repeated, my voice flat. "There's nothing to fix, Rachel. You killed whatever there was the moment you walked into that hotel room with him." She blinked, fresh tears welling in her eyes. "Please," she whispered. "I'm begging you. I don't want to lose you. I know what I did was wrong. We can move past this. I'll leave Mark. We can rebuild." For a moment, I let the silence stretch, watching her squirm under the weight of her own guilt. Then, I took a step closer, my voice dropping to a whisper. "You don't get it, do you? This isn't about forgiveness, Rachel. It's about justice. And it's already too late for you." Confusion flickered across her face, and for the first time, I saw the fear in her eyes, the real, genuine fear that she was about to lose everything. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice shaking. I leaned in, my eyes locking onto hers. "Did you really think I'd let you walk away from this without consequence? Do you think I'd just let you ruin my life and go on living yours like nothing happened?" Her lips trembled, and she shook her head, her eyes wide with disbelief. "David, what did you do?" I straightened, folding my arms across my chest. "I exposed your little affair. Mark's career is over. He's being investigated for misconduct, and you're about to be the woman who destroyed him." Her face went ghostly pale as the realization hit her. "No," she whispered, stepping back, shaking her head in denial. "You didn't, David, you can't." "I already did," I said coldly. "It's done." She stared at me, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water, struggling to find the words. Then, finally, she broke down, sinking to her knees on the living room floor, sobbing. "David, please, please don't do this. You can't destroy everything we've built over one mistake." "One mistake," I snarled, the rage I'd been holding in finally spilling over. "You destroyed us, Rachel. You threw away our marriage, our life together, for a cheap fling with a man who doesn't give a damn about you. Now you want mercy. Now you want forgiveness." Her sobs grew louder, her body shaking as she knelt there, completely broken. But I felt no sympathy. This was the moment I had been waiting for. The moment where she finally understood the magnitude of what she had done. "Please, David," she whispered through her tears. "I'm begging you." I knelt down in front of her, grabbing her chin and forcing her to look at me. "Begging won't save you now, Rachel. I'm done with you. You want to be with Mark so badly. Fine. You'll watch him fall and you'll go down with him." I let go of her face and stood up, stepping back as she collapsed into herself, her sobs echoing through the room. The sight of her, broken and pathetic, should have made me feel triumphant, But instead, there was a strange emptiness inside me. The revenge I had craved for so long was finally in motion, but it didn't feel as satisfying as I thought it would. But it wasn't over yet. The next morning, the police were at the door. I wasn't surprised. Mark, in his desperate attempt to save himself, had lashed out, using every connection he had to throw accusations at me. But I was ready for this. I had anticipated it. As they escorted me to the car, Rachel watched from the front step, her face ashen. She didn't say a word, but her eyes told me everything. She knew this was her fault. She knew this was the final nail in the coffin. The charges against me were flimsy. Mark had accused me of corporate sabotage, of hacking his personal accounts to expose him. But none of that mattered. The damage had already been done. Mark's career was in ruins. Rachel's reputation shattered. And me? I would deal with the fallout. As the police car drove away from our house, I glanced back one last time. Rachel stood there, looking like a ghost of the woman I once knew, and I realized that there was no satisfaction to be found in revenge. The hatred I had harbored, the pain I had felt, it had consumed me, twisted me into something unrecognizable. In the end, we were both destroyed.